I'm the most senior benefit fraud investigator and assessment officer from Birmingham. I've come up here, that's why we've kept you waiting to interview you. Because you're a fraudster. I went, okay, thank you very much, sir. It's nice of you to be candid. He said, I've watched you walk in the building, sit down. I've watched how uncomfortable it was for you on camera. I've seen you have 2 TIAs where your eye went and you started to drool, and probably 3 or 4 apneas where you fell asleep and burst out of it. And he said, and I'm quite convinced on that assessment alone, forget anything else, that you are as ill as you say you are. And so I'm going to take it from there. So I said, right. I said, what's all these files? So he looked down and he looked up and he went, well, submarines. Submarines are going to be very important in this interview, aren't they? Hi everybody, it's Fat Steve.
Hello, it's Fat Sandra, but I'm not fat.
And together, we're Spices Media. Anyway, a lot of boys always want to train or to be a train driver, but I always wanted a submarine. I had boats and anyway, at Barrow they had a charity had bought an old submarine that was made just after World War II. I don't know if it was ever used or not, and I went over and they wanted 350 grand for it, and I bought it. And the plan was to take it to Liverpool and make a museum about World War II and history and teach. And then I found out it needed the right tide, 6 tugs, the right weather, the right time of day to coordinate together to tow it across to Liverpool, only about, not Liverpool, to Preston, sorry. And it would have cost more than the submarine cost. Now, we had intended to sail it, we got a crew together and then got told by the Home Office that you can't sail a submarine in British waters because we could dive and come up somewhere and cause an international incident. So that went out the window. I sold it back to the charity and knocked 50 grand off, so in effect it was like a 50 grand donation. And I decided I was going to build a submarine. So I was at the big house at Chorley, I had staff, I had equipment, and I went to several narrowboat companies, and the only one that took me seriously was Collingwood Boats in Liverpool. I don't know what it's called today, I don't know if he's still going. And I gave him a rough sketch and he drew plans and he agreed to make it for about 12 or 15,000 pounds, just the metalwork. So that got underway, and as you can see here, there should be photographs of that coming through. And
this is a reminder. This is a reminder. Have your lunch.
It must be 12 o'clock, folks.
This is a reminder. This is a reminder. Have your lunch.
So, God, that pan and scrub sponges, I think. I can't remember, it's that long ago. So, you can see it's lunchtime. I'm not drunk. I'm just drinking Pepsi Max. Anyway, he built the shell, and then we got teams of people in to start fitting the woodwork out. A lot of it we designed and cut in some of the garages at the big house in Chorley. My son was helping, some of the staff were helping. Robert, my stepson, was helping. Christ, they're all going off today. So we constructed all this woodwork, went out to where it had been built and fitted it out. And eventually we put it in the canal at Bottent Bay. So this morning, remember the taxman was onto us and we were trying to hide a bit, so we decided to build a submarine and put it on the canal on Bottent Bay. Anyway, I get up this day, I go in the control room and I'm having a look out the cameras and I see a film crew, and then I see a helicopter, and then I see another film crew, and my wife's asleep, and I go to the captain's cabin and I say, you quick, I'm at the door, I say, you need to come and have a look at this. And she's going, oh, what? And then she puts the telly on, and I said, look, you need to get up now and come and have a look. So she said, no, she said, you need to come in here and have a look at this. And I stepped in the lounge, and bang, there we are, live on Sky News, trying to run away and hide from the taxman. And eventually I managed to get a friend to come with a dinghy. We climbed out a hatch at the side and sailed off out of the way. So that made national news instantly. There were people come from all over the world filming it, and we set off on a journey along the Leeds Liverpool Canal. We ended up, I've mentioned before, in Liverpool, and we were the first submarine to go through Albert Dock, first U-boat, and but it was a replica, it was a mock-up. It was a bit like it, but not that big. We actually made it more into a museum about World War II history, and I've told you the story of the sign at Liverpool that said free to come on board, free to take photographs, and we had it translated to different languages, and no Chinamen, no Chinese people came on. And this guy, excuse me, that Pepsi Max is a bit dodgy, and this gentleman called me and said, your sign? I said, yeah. He said, I just need to translate it. It's because we'd done it off Google Maps, and in Chinese it said, it's free to take photographs and it's free to ejaculate on board. And that was Google Translate. Anyway, we sailed it across and we got to Leeds, along the Leeds Liverpool Canal, or no, it was the Rochdale Canal we went along in the end, at that end bit. And we set it up as a museum. British Waterways gave us a 2-year licence to operate at the front of the Royal Armouries. Everything was wonderful. We had something like 22,000 free school children visits, so there was only 12 people allowed on board, so there would be 10 children and 2 teachers. They would dress up and run around and have fun. As usual in my relationships, with my wife at the time, things were going downhill. The money had now stopped. We were trying to live off scratch. Is there a budgie in the house? We were trying to live off scratchy bits of money that we'd accumulated, and I think I had to claim benefit even it was that bad. And we was running the narrowboat as U8047 charity. Interesting things on there. There was a granddad, probably my age now, that used to bring a little boy called Harvey, and he had some sort of mental illness and he couldn't speak, and he'd bring Harvey every few days, and Harvey would run around and play on the boats, and then suddenly one day they were climbing out and he said, can we come back tomorrow, Grandad? And his granddad froze and looked at me and said, he's never spoken before. So to me, that's one of them lifetime things where you mentor or influence somebody, even a child, somewhere between 7 and 10. And the U-boat museum brought him out of his shell, and he used to come back and he could speak fluently afterwards, and it was the Submarine Museum that had done that. Right at the end, as I was closing that museum, a family was up and down on the quayside, and I looked carefully, and it was a Jewish family, and this was like a World War II replica U-boat. they were walking up and down, and I felt obliged to go out, and I said, I'm sorry if you're offended, I'm just trying to teach history. And the father said, can we have a... I said, yeah. So I think there was a girl about 14, a couple of lads about 9 or 10, and mum and dad. The boys are there in the titsels, or in the traditional costume, shall we say? I don't know. Don't want to be offensive to anybody. And they came on board, and the boys went in the front, and in the front there was replica weapons, uniforms. So they're running round the boat playing soldiers, and there was a screen that had a little video I made about the Holocaust. That was playing on one TV, and as we came back, this girl and her parents stopped, and she said, can I watch this, Mum? And she said, yeah. And she watched it, and it was showing the children in the ghetto. If I can, I'll slot it in, but I don't know if I lost it or not. So these were the children in the ghetto in 1943, I think, just before they got taken and murdered in Auschwitz. And she watched this video, and the parents were looking down and I were looking down. It was a bit embarrassing, a bit strange. And at the end of it, as it went off, it shows the two young kids just traumatised. It was one of the most harrowing things I've ever seen. And this girl looked at her parents and she said, oh, she said, when was that? I said, 1943. And she went, 1943? Everybody in that film will be dead then now, won't they? And it's doing it now. Don't know if you can see them hairs. In the real world, and as history tells us, them children were dead within days of getting to Auschwitz. But what she meant was, it was so long ago, the children will have died of old age, and Mum, Dad and me, still at it, Mum, that's Facebook, that's fucking Facebook, interrupting me when I'm trying to make a video. And the three of us cried, and she didn't understand, and Mum comforted her and spoke to her, and all the time the boys are running around going, bang, bang, bang. So we'd made that replica submarine so that when there were people on board, we could suddenly set off a klaxon horn, and again there might be a little video of this, and we'd shut the hatches and we'd do an emergency dive scene with clips from Das Boot and sounds from Das Boot.
You are dead! Not a big surprise!
And we had, if you remember, they used to water plants outside buildings with little pipes, and we'd have water spraying, Dolby surround sound all everywhere in the boat, and the whole thing would shake. And sometimes my wife would climb on the boat and start rocking it. And it was a very, very realistic emergency dive and be bombed. And at that last moment, when the biggest bomb went off, I'd switched the lights off, and it went into red light and total darkness, and people... We didn't frighten anybody to death. We put a woman into labour once, I think, and we had an Asian gentleman complaining he was going to sue us because his son wet his pants. But apart from that, it was very educational, very good, very popular. Lots of people flocked to see it. That was U8047, the Submarine Museum. With all the equipment on it and uniforms and replica firearms, it probably cost 120 grand with electronics. I went down to a film studio company in London and bought panels and displays with flashing lights and things. You could actually steer it from inside the helm position on camera, but it was very hard to do, but we tried it a few times and very successful. And then suddenly one day there's a thing called TripAdvisor, and on TripAdvisor we got more hits than the Royal Armouries, which is the Queen's Museum of Arms and Weapons, and they weren't very happy in the slightest. And I don't know if the land was theirs or if it was the council's or if it was British Waterways then. It's changed now to Canal River Trust, and the man from Canal River Trust or British Waterways came down and he said, you have to close or you have to move. I said, well, what? We've got a 2-year lease. Yeah, well, that's going to be debated, isn't it? What's wrong? You've upset the Royal Armouries. I said, we don't go in there. We don't. Well, take it from me, they don't want you at the front of their museum anyway, and you'll have to move down the basin a bit. Now, recently I was there filming, and there's like a big cafe that's been built out over the water, and we were moved beyond that in another basin, and people couldn't find us. We weren't allowed to put signs out, and it just got worse and worse, and that caused more and more stress between my wife and me. She eventually ran off with a boyfriend, which happens, and I got so depressed. I woke up the one day and I thought, that's it, I'm going to drive it into the bridge. And I thought, no, if I hurt somebody, it's not just criminal damage. So I had 2 girls, 2 lesbians that were 19 staying with me, and they slept in one part of the boat and I slept in the captain's cabin, and they had a fallout. One went, and I said to the other, I'm going tomorrow, I'm going to go down to Sandwich in Kent or somewhere and buy a little boat. What are you doing with this? I said, I'm sailing it over towards Hull. I'm going to sell it or something, I don't know. So anyway, we set off. We're going to London to buy a Heat magazine. What are we doing?
We're going to London to buy a Heat magazine.
Going to London to buy a Heat magazine, 'cause we're all fucking mad. We got out of the basin and we nipped into Leeds for some things, and on Leeds Market there were paramedics teaching CPR. So this girl says, oh, can I try? I said, yeah. So it took an hour, and they taught her the basics of CPR. We got on the boat and we set off to Hull. Well, I think we got as far as Goole, and I'm stood on the back driving, and I look down and there's a spider, like some sort of tarantula, a massive spider, God knows where it was that big. And I took a breath in and I felt a sharp pain, and she hit it with something and managed to throw it, and it wasn't a TIA, it was a proper heart attack. But I just didn't realise how bad it was. I was hot, I was sweating. We got to Goole, I think. I slept a little bit. I was still a bit ill that next day, and we stripped nearly everything off the boat that was combustible and just burnt it in a huge bonfire. And there were antiques. There was a letter for a girl allowed out of the camps to go to work for an officer. It cost me 25 grand as an auction. I just burned it. Uniforms, everything. Anything that could burn, we burned. I think I left 1 or 2 torpedoes with a pub at Goole, And then I had it lifted out of the water and chopped up, and I got £9 scrap for it. So that was that. The next day I've got a carrier bag, and this girl, Kate, comes with me. And we set off for Sandwich in Kent, and we pulled up at Sandwich. And I got out of the car to look at this boat, and I felt a sharp pain, and bang, that was me, gone. I was about 4 days in hospital. I woke up, she came to see me. I said, I've had a heart attack. She said, oh, I've tried ringing your wife and she won't speak to me. Oh, Christ. I said, what have you done with that money? She says, I've still got it here in a carrier bag. I said, all right, so I've still got me £9. No, I've had to stay in a hotel. Right, which hotel? Well, in Sandwich in Kent, there's a very famous couple called Steph and Dom. And they live in a lovely big house, a lovely big estate. I think they were on Gogglebox or something. And she'd been staying in her hotel. And I think she'd spent £2,000 or £3,000 in 3 or 4 days. And eventually I bought a little boat. Started living on there for a little bit. She kicked off, as they do after a few days, and left. And that was that. I was retired, I'd had enough, I had enough to live on. And everything was looking good, and my ex-wife turned up. And that was a time when Facebook Messenger put a locator on and told people where you were. And that's how she found me. So that's a bit about the submarine from start to finish. Many times on that, I said we travelled all over the place, had a fantastic time. It was a bit stressful for my wife because again she was having to use lock keys that she didn't like. So I don't know how long I've been, I don't know what I can put with this, but there should be a few bits and bats. So for now, I think it's Monday, just early Monday afternoon. And it's about Steve, Spices Media. I've got to mention this top. Now, there's a friend on Church Street, Blackpool. It's like Blackpool Bargains, I think. He has all sorts of weird and wonderful bits of clothing. And this looks a bit Blackpoolish for me because it's orange. But I think it were a fiver or a tenner. It's quite warm. It's quite nice. So that's just to promote him a little bit. I've bought a couple of red t-shirts, I think, off him, and this a few weeks ago. So that's a bit about the submarine, folks. And I've just realised I was supposed to be talking about the VAT frauds. Or have I done that? I can't remember. I love you all. My head's messed up, as you all know. So for now, it's about Steve. I'm not fat. At Spices Media. Do. Keep safe, everybody. Bye.
Hi everybody, it's Fat Steve. Hello, it's Fat Sandra, but I'm not fat.
And together, we're Spices Media. So bye everybody, Fat Sandra and Fat Steve, Spices Media.